This video will introduce you to the idea of using auxiliary lines in order to solve problems. So first of all, what is an auxiliary line? It's a line or part of a line that's added to a diagram in order to help complete a problem. So if we look at this first example where they're asking us to determine the measure of angle W, we can see that they are giving us these two solid parallel lines represented in the figure or marked in the figure with the arrows, and they're going to add the auxiliary line, which in this case is that dotted line right down the middle of the picture. And I'm going to mark this in such a way that it's parallel to the given lines. And probably the most important thing you want to make sure you remember about auxiliary lines is that you are never ever going to look at more than two lines at once. If you're trying to solve this by looking at more than two parallel lines, you're making it unnecessarily difficult. So to solve this, I'm going to start out by looking at the two purple parallel lines. And for the two purple parallel lines, that red line segment is a transversal. And because one of the alternate interior angles measures 35, I know that the second alternate interior angle must be 35 degrees as well. Now that I'm done looking at the purple lines, I'm going to go ahead and switch my focus and look at the parallel lines that I just marked in the picture in green. And for those green lines, the blue segment now represents the transversal. And just like I did for the purple lines, if one of the alternate interior angles for the green lines measures 41, its alternate interior buddy must measure 41 as well. And now you can see from the way that I've marked the diagrams that the measure of angle W is comprised or made up of the measure of angle E plus the measure of angle F. But the measure of angle E from the picture we said is 41 degrees, and the measure of angle F we said from the diagram is 35 degrees, making the measure of angle W the sum of those two, or in other words, a grand total of 76 degrees. So again, you might think about this as looking at the picture in teeny tiny little parts, and then either in this case we put the parts together, but in some of the examples we might be taking some of the pieces apart. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the next one. It says find the measure of angle 1. In this example, it's not quite as straightforward because they haven't drawn in for us the auxiliary line. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and draw in that auxiliary line, and I'm going to draw that in such a way that all three of those lines that I just marked in the diagram are parallel to one another. And then like I did with the first example, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at two of the lines and start by looking at just two. So it really doesn't matter which two, but for our intents and purposes here, I'm going to look at the two that I just made red. And for those red parallel lines, the blue ray would be a transversal. And along that transversal, one of the angles is 51. His little corresponding buddy down here is going to have to be 51 degrees as well. Now that I'm done with the red lines, I'm going to go ahead and shift my focus. And I'm going to look at the pair of lines where I'm using one of them as the auxiliary line and the second is the given original. My transversal for the green lines is that purple transversal. And in looking at that 33-degree angle, I'm going to look at his little alternate interior angle buddy up here, which also must measure 33 degrees. So again, in following the same spirit that I applied to the first one, the measure of angle 1 is made up of those two angles, 51 degrees and 33 degrees, making the measure of angle 1 equal to 84 degrees. And in this last example here, again, I'm going to employ that same strategy. So looking at the two parallel lines, I don't have a transversal that intersects both of those parallel lines. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my new parallel line in there. And again, I'm going to draw it in such a way that it's parallel to the two given lines. And then I'm going to proceed or start by looking at any two of those parallel lines. And this example is a little bit different in that I know the measure of this big angle, but the corresponding buddy to the 35 degrees is going to be down here. I know that the measure of the entire red angle is 67, so to find this teeny tiny little missing piece represented by the red arcs, I'm going to do the 67 subtract the 35. Or in other words, making that little angle represented by the two red arcs 32 degrees. This helps me because if I now switch my focus and I instead look at the parallel lines that I just marked there in purple, the transversal for the purple lines is going to be that green ray. And if I look at the alternate interior buddy to the angle marked by the 32 degrees, his measure must be the same, 32 degrees, making the measure of angle 3 equal to 32 degrees. So one thing I want you to pay attention to or to notice in this video is in some of the examples, namely example, the one where we found angle W in example 1, we added to find our answer. But in the second example, we actually had to do some subtraction. So it's different in each case depending on the information that has been given to us in the problem. All right, that's about all I have in here for this video, but as always, I want to thank you for the gift of your time, and I want to ask you to, in your own words or in your own language, list the key ideas that you think it's going to be important to remember from this video in order to problem solve, and then see if you can use what you've learned in order to solve those questions on the next page.